Welcome you back to the Patrick Netherton Show right here on 1130 The Tiger. He's Roger Sampton. I'm Patrick Netherton, and we're pleased to welcome in one of our favorites, sports law professor, writer for The Athletic, does a little bit of everything, takes viral photos. She's got a little bit of everything in her back pocket. She is Alicia Jessop joining us now. Alicia, how are you?
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
Yeah, that's always my first question with everyone these days is before we get into all the stuff and the reason why we have you on, just how's life, how's the family, how are your friends, how's everyone doing, especially because you're in one of the more interesting states to be in terms of this coronavirus.
Yeah, I'm paying a lot of rent in California to never be able to leave my house again.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, everything's good. I still have a job, which is awesome. My immediate family is doing well. Unfortunately, we lost my uncle to the virus, but, it's crazy times for everyone, so I don't think I'm too much different than anybody else.
Well, I will say this, Alicia, that is somewhat unusual because I think maybe that's something that a lot of us are missing in this, and you can maybe speak to this, is, a lot of us that are in this, and especially, we're here in Northwest Louisiana. We don't have a ton of cases. So it's pretty rare to either know someone that has been affected by this or at the worst, died from it. So, to hear someone like you that has had a close relative that has fallen to this it's kind of sobering in a lot of ways because it sort of brings home the real threat that this is. Because I don't know that I think a lot of people just see 80-something thousand people die, and that's just a number. There's no real emotion tied to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a real thing. And look, I'm not going to get political on your radio show, but I'm really moderate. And so when this thing began, it was hard to understand the drastic measures that were being taken as you watched the economy literally collapse overnight. And then I think as time went on for me personally, my cousin was diagnosed with it really early on, and unfortunately her father contracted it, and he was in the hospital on a ventilator. He didn't have any serious pre-existing conditions, but was in the hospital on a ventilator for weeks, upward of over 20 days, and unfortunately passed. And it's real. This is a real virus that we do not have a cure for. We do not have a vaccine for. And so you either have to let it play its course. And there are a lot of people who are recovering. We've seen some examples of that in the sports world. I just read an article today with the Broncos player Von Miller talking about his experience with the virus. And, he's a pretty fit guy. And he said, my lungs were just being brutalized, and it was awful. So, yeah, I think things become a lot more real when you watch it unfold with your own family. My cousins had to say goodbye to their father via Zoom, and I think a lasting memory I will have is my cousin screenshotting me a picture of the Zoom code and the Zoom password on a ripped up piece of paper being held by a nurse's hand, saying, if you want to say goodbye to my dad, you can get on Zoom. So that definitely changes a lot of your perspective in this moment.
No, man, that's and look, please, our condolences to you and the family. That's brutal. That and I think, and this is what I keep talking about, Alicia, is until we have something that we can fight this with, whether it be a very effective treatment, whether it be a vaccine, which is probably months and months away. But even something, we're hearing some of these drugs that are getting fast-tracked and all of that stuff. But until we have something that is an effective treatment like a Tamiflu is with a normal strain of flu, or you get your flu shot, your flu vaccination, I don't know how we in the sandbox of life in the sports world, how can we get back to any sense of normalcy when this is lurking out there? And again, it's not the players contracting it that's the problem. It's everyone that they may come in contact with. Do you see, we're hearing a lot of bluster from the PGA Tour and the NBA talking about a lot of different plans, MLB starting in July 4th. Do you see a way forward for this, or is this going to be just too much of a morass to wade through for these leagues to try to get back and going?
Well, it's really fascinating seeing who is coming to the forefront of this decision-making. So we've had a UFC fight. We have Arizona and Florida announcing that their states are open for professional sports, although you cannot compete in front of fans. We have Major League Baseball owners voting amongst themselves to bring the league back in July, to be seen if players agree to a revenue-sharing plan. We'll have to come back to that on a different episode where we talk about the massive labor disputes that are going to arise after this period of time. But to your point, from a legal perspective, there is so much unknown, and I understand the desire to be bullish from an economic standpoint, and I understand the role that sports plays in the American psyche, where after 9/11, for instance, one thing that brought the U.S. back together were sporting events. And so I understand the collective need for all of us to have something to root for and to lift our spirits during this time. But this isn't a 9/11 moment. Yes, we still feared terrorism after that horrible event, but 9/11 took place over the time period of one day. We had those very unfortunate instances, and then we were hopefully better secured. This isn't that. We don't know when this is going to end. And I'm fearful that as we attempt to rush back to normal life, we're moving a little bit too soon because life's not normal anymore. On Easter, my pastor gave an incredible sermon where he said, stop waiting for life to get back to normal. We're not going back to pre-March 15th life. And we have to stop looking forward to that. We're entering into a new world where there's going to have to be adjustments to be made. And so for us as sports fans, what that adjustment likely looks like is we're not having college sports in the way we did in the fall. And we've already seen some of that with the MAC changing their fall championship.
Yeah, eliminated 8 of them.
They eliminated 8 of them. Notably, there's no elimination or change announced yet to football. But I think it's really unwise to make determinations right now when this virus still isn't under the wraps. You know, to your point, where you're located, you're not seeing exacerbated cases of it. We've been under a very serious shelter in place in California since roughly March 16th. Our numbers are still growing, though. And so it's really tough to reopen sports when sports relies on interstate commerce, that being traveling across borders to engage in the competition, where different borders have different issues. So this really is a state-by-state issue.
Well, interestingly, Louisiana has we've been locked down for a while. We've had more of the strident measures, mostly because of New Orleans. New Orleans was a hot spot for it early on, so our governor locked us down pretty quickly. We're just now coming out of the stay-at-home quarantine order on Friday, moving into phase 1. Correct me if I'm wrong, did California announce another 3 months of, did that happen today?
It's unclear.
Okay, no, that's the thing.
I laugh because
that's another problem. No one seems to know.
Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows.
It's so frustrating.
That's this point, Patrick, is it's so, like, I would love to get on your show and be like, yep, we're definitely having a college football season. So I'm a full-time professor at Pepperdine University, and we're facing the same issue as college sports of what do we do? Do we come back on campus in the fall? Do we go online? And I think our dean at Pepperdine did an incredible job where he communicated with all of the faculty members and he said, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have some magic ball. And I think that's the thing that everyone needs to realize in this moment is nobody has done this before.
Yeah.
Nobody has experienced the coronavirus before. And so we are all living this together. And that's where my concern comes in, is when you decide to go back to play. So let's take the NBA, for instance. The Players Association sent text messages to players over the last couple of days asking if they want to come back.
Yeah.
We're dealing with some of the most competitive people on the planet. Of course they want to come back. So then Adam Silver has this teleconference with them where he says, look, if we come back, we're coming back, and you're facing the reality that somebody can test positive. And if that happens, we're not shutting down the league again. So you just have to deal with it. Okay, that sounds great. But we've seen with this virus that perfectly healthy young people who contract the disease are capable of being killed by the disease.
Yeah.
And so when you take that stance, you are opening your league up to massive legal risk, because what we're looking at here is what's called a negligence cause of action. And there's 4 elements to successfully prove negligence. The first element is duty of care. And what duty of care looks at is, what is the reasonable response? What would a reasonable league do in this situation? And that's what's so fascinating to me as various leagues unroll different return to play stances, is what's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Is reasonable to go back as we used to? Is reasonable to house players in dorms and assume that they're sheltering in place and not interacting with other people and bringing the virus back into the dorm? Is reasonable having college football players play a game where they come into very close contact to each other? And so with what happened in California yesterday with the state university system, which is the biggest public university system in this country.
Mm-hmm.
It has close to 500,000 students. With them announcing we're going online in the fall, to me, that really begins to set the precedent of what the duty of care is. And if other schools go on campus, and if a person contracts the coronavirus and dies, you are opening yourself up to massive legal liability that, to me, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, and you know, it's there's always kind of a patient zero. Rudy Gobert was the patient zero. Mm-hmm. The NBA responded by shutting itself down, and then that was the domino that knocked all the rest of the dominoes over. College basketball followed suit. Spring sports followed suit. Suspending and then getting canceled. I think the California State University system may be the Rudy Gobert of the fall response in saying, hey, we're setting the precedent here. And as you mentioned, it's the largest public system of universities there is in the country. Boom. Once they set that, now how do you look at it as, okay, we're, the University of Louisiana system, or we're the University of Texas system? How do you look at that and go, okay, well, fine and dandy for them, but we're cool. We're going to go back to school. As you mentioned, once the first person comes down with it and something really bad happens, they die, or there's some sort of a massive, injury of some kind, debilitating injury of the lungs or whatever. Now you've just opened yourself up to all kind of legal threat. And mm-hmm. I just don't know, shy of there being somebody that can direct all of this. I just don't know how you can have hundreds of different entities that all have different rules and all have different regulations, and you have any ability to have them come together and play any sport whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. And I think it'll be more likely that we see pro sports. I hate being the look. I love college sports. I enjoy Saturdays in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. Until this virus is really under wraps, and until there is widespread testing, until there is a formidable vaccine, I honestly don't see how you have college football this fall. And this is why I say that. The difference between college football and the professional leagues who are considering going back, mm-hmm. those professional leagues are unionized. So they are together as a collective body who are being advised by premier attorneys on their decision. College athletes don't have that. Athletes don't have that. And the NCAA has faced widespread litigation over the last decade, where if they open up the doors to playing college football in the fall, or pick whatever your favorite sport is, but I think college football is really going to be the most drastic because of the really close contact athletes come into play with. And if one of those athletes gets sick, you are opening yourself up to massive litigation and a massive public relations nightmare.
Yeah.
So I just think from a cost-benefit analysis, from a legal perspective, a public relations perspective, we could go so far down this with a legal analysis. It's not worth it. It's really not worth it.
It really isn't. Talking to Alicia Jessop, sports law professor at Pepperdine and writer for The Athletic. All right, so we hear that Cal State system decides, hey, we're not having students in the fall. There just cannot be a way that universities can justify bringing only student athletes back to campus, right? Like it can't happen.
So Mark Emmert gets beat up in the press a lot, but he came out a couple of days ago and essentially said that's not going to happen. And I give him a lot of respect for that, because in making that announcement, he is holding to what the NCAA claims its mission is that academics are paramount to athletics. And it's really hard to claim that your mission is academics is paramount to athletics if every other student is not on campus, but the football team is there. So he made it pretty abundantly clear that if the rest of the student body is not on campus, college athletes are not going to be on campus either. And this goes against what Pac-12 coaches came together and said a couple of days ago, that they want a uniform return to play. Like, who's advising these people?
Yeah.
I understand. Like, I actually don't understand why this is controversial. Like, you could be a supporter of the economy and you can also be a believer in science.
Well,
and I don't know who is advising those men.
And the crazy thing is, because every state is handling this and has such a different either response or level of infection or level of issue with this, that there's just no way to have any uniformity. And that, it'd be great if the NCAA could say, yeah, we're all going back to practice on August 1st. But they can't, because we don't know what Florida and Louisiana and Texas and California and Oklahoma and we don't know what all these states are going to look like. California might still be locked down. I mean, if the 3 months that apparently allegedly came down today is in effect, y'all aren't going to be ready to get back to sports by July. It baffles me that they think there can be some measure of uniformity when all of the response is handled so locally.
100%. And again, we have to let go of this belief that life is going to go back to normal. And that sounds depressing. And I don't mean for it to sound depressing, because maybe there's better things that await us on the other side of this. But nobody on this earth has confronted this virus to its conclusion. None of us.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what happens. Nobody knows, does it come back in the fall? Nobody knows whether the vaccine is effective. We don't know. And so you're literally playing with people's lives. And I know the argument of, well, this is like a flu season. It isn't like a flu season, because we have 80,000 people who have died when the country essentially went into hiding. What happens if the NBA doesn't cancel its season? What happens if March Madness is played? What happens if universities were held using face-to-face contact? How much higher would those numbers be, and how greater of a toll to our economy would there be if our healthcare system was in fact rushed and unprepared for the massive amounts of deaths and illnesses that could have arisen had we not taken the proactive measures that we did? So here's my argument to everybody. Read a book. Pick up a new skill. Work on your business. Talk to your family. Have a fake tailgate party. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I don't think we're going to see football in August.
There you go. I think that's a good place to leave it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if we'll see the NFL, but I'm reasonably certain we're not seeing college football, at least in any sort of form we would recognize. Maybe a couple of couple places play, that kind of thing. But I don't know that you can have any sort of uniformity in getting back to this, at least until if they discover a miracle drug tomorrow and it works, then hey, yeah, let's get back to normal. But until that happens, we're definitely in a holding pattern. Alicia, thank you so much for your time, and again, please condolences to your family and everyone. That's That's horrible. It really is. And hopefully we can get back together at some point and talk about a seagull stealing your crab your crab roll instead of all of this that we're talking about. But
yeah, we'll talk about something more happy.
Exactly.
And fun. So, hate to be the bearer of bad news. Don't destroy me on Twitter. I want sports back as much as anyone, but we're not living in a normal universe right now.
Agreed. And please stay safe out there. Take care of all your friends and family. All right.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Alicia Jessop, sports professor at Pepperdine and writer for The Athletic.